listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
We are mostly live from America and just outside the Matrix. It is time once again for the show that brings you the truth behind the headlines. I'm investigative journalist Lee Stranahan, and this is The Backstory. Now, I say mostly live because I'm not live right now. We had a pre-taped interview because we point out when our show starts, it's about midnight in Moscow, which is a little late for people. And so we have, in the first hour, coming up in just a few minutes, we have a great interview with Robert Bridge, who's an American who's been living in Russia for some time, a writer, author. That means he's done books. You're going to enjoy that. Then in the second hour, it is Tuesday, so it is Truth Tuesday. That's Crowdsource the Truth. Jason Goodman is joining us as the co-host in the second hour. And we are honored and pleased to have our friend Manila Chan from RT, great journalist who works over at RT, and we'll be talking about events with her. Now, that's going to be live. So right now, I'm recorded, but later I'll be live. Figure that out. We got that and more coming up on The Backstory. So I just want to mention what happened yesterday. We were doing the show, and we have a couple of YouTube channels that this show plays on. And one of them is my own channel, Populous TV, but it also goes out to the Backstory Radio YouTube channel, which is a separate channel. And for the people listening on the Backstory Radio channel, about an hour and a half into the show yesterday, an hour and 40 minutes, the show just cut out because YouTube had pulled it down. So we're already suffering some of that censorship that, ironically, we were talking about with Carmine Sabia on the show yesterday. It is ironic to me that on the day we were talking about censorship, we should get censored. And they said it's a violation of community, and I have no idea what the hell we did. We didn't do a different show. If you listened to the show yesterday, and by the way, it still is available in a number of places, including the Sputnik website, where it's always going to be available, VK. Oddly, it's still up on my Populous TV channel, but I don't want to tell anyone. I want to kind of keep that quiet for everybody, because I don't want... It's, to me, only logical if YouTube erased it one place, they'd erase it someplace else. And I don't want them to erase it, because I like our show, and I don't think we're doing anything weird. And I don't think we're doing anything that should be erased. Even though, and we got an interesting situation where the Czech Republic has said, if you say the wrong thing, you could spend up to 3 years in prison for saying anything anti-NATO, pro-Russian. That's what the Czech Republic has said. But that's nothing. You can do the 3 years easy. In Slovakia, it's up to 25 years for frickin' talking, for ideas, for things that you think. So that's the environment we're in now. So I guess censorship on YouTube is comparatively like, it's like if somebody had lost a limb and you said, well, I stubbed my nail. If someone's in prison for 25 years, because the stuff, because again, the truth right now has a distinctly pro-Russian bias. Reality has a pro-Russian bias. So anyway, I just want to point out the censorship yesterday, and I'll be talking to Manila Chan later. We'll be talking about how the film that I'm in, Revealing Ukraine, it's been shadow banned. I talked about this yesterday. It's been shadow banned over at Amazon. You can't find it. But Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post, I'm not shocked. But anyway, it's a very interesting point we live in right now. So let me do this. Later we'll be taking your calls because, again, I think one important thing, but not now because I'm not live now, so don't bother. But I'll tell you the number in a second, and that way you can write it down and have it handy if you want to call in and be part of the show later. But first, we're going to hear Robert Bridge, and that's pre-recorded. And I haven't recorded that yet. When I'm doing this intro, I haven't done the interview with Robert, so I'm as excited as anyone to see how that goes. But I'm sure it'll be great. But sometimes when I do these pre-recorded things, I can tell you the interview is great because I've already did it. But in this case, I'd have to predict the future. So I will predict the future. The interview coming up is going to be great. Am I manifesting it? Am I predicting it? Who knows? But anyway, I love you guys. We live in a time of censorship, and just you watching or listening, really, we're on the radio, 105.5 FM, AM 1390 in Washington, D.C. right now. Just you listening to the truth is a revolutionary act. Think about how weird that is. Anyway, coming up after this short break, we're going to be talking to Robert Bridge from Russia, get his perspective on the war, on how it's being perceived in Russia, and so on. And then we'll be taking your calls after the interview when I will be live. 202, unless something horrible happens between now and then. In which case, this is my last recording until this interview. So that'd be weird. But I think I'll be okay. 202-521-1320 is the number if you want to call and be part of the show. We got Robert Bridge coming up right after this. You're listening to The Backstory. And we are joined now by analyst and author Robert Bridge. And Robert, you are in Moscow right now, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so let me ask you this. How, and I'm really sort of asking, let me, not to be a Nazi, but let me use a German word, zeitgeist, the general feeling. What's the feeling like in Moscow right now? How are things when you go out to the store or whatever?
To be honest, just in public, everything is pretty fine. You know, you have this, there is a split. I wouldn't say the split is 50-50. I've heard that anywhere up to 75% of the Russian population, they agree with what is happening. You have the doubters, and so it makes for a lot of heated discussion on television and everything. They've got their people talking about it, their commentators, and everybody's. It's just one of those subjects. It's a bit like. I guess I could compare it to COVID. Some people, want to get the jab, other people don't. That's sort of a thing, Some people believe they should be there. Other people believe they should not be. Russians, by nature, they're not. I know this goes completely against the Western mindset, but they're not the type of people who really enjoy war. They've had horrendous experiences with it in the past, so and historically, they've actually been, if you look at their history, they've actually been people who have been more defensive than anything. I mean, people have attacked Russia more than Russia has attacked other people. So they, in this old notion, the stereotypical bear, if you poke it enough times, eventually you're going to arouse it. And I think that's what's basically happened. They've succeeded in poking it enough times, and it's finally waken up from its hibernation, so to speak.
Yeah, well, no, I don't know if you were in the United States at the run-up to the Iraq War after 9/11, or where were you during 9/11?
Yeah, I was in Moscow during that, Lee.
Okay, so that was, but I'll tell you, I was, for me especially, because I happen to be in Las Vegas, Nevada. So imagine one of the most surreal places on earth already. Las Vegas is inherently weird. And during 9/11.
I was in Moscow during 9/11 as well, believe it or not. I was in a cafe called Uncle Sam's, which is actually still there. Very surreal moment for me. But anyways, that's a different story.
No, that's an interesting story. What is Uncle Sam? Is it American, like hamburger?
Yeah, it's in the center of Moscow. It's been there for years. It's the strangest place. It has a lot of meaning for me. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I happen to be in the basement of it's a basement place, a huge pool hall, and it's kind of gone downhill since I used to go there, so I don't really go there anymore. But there's actually a bus stop sign from my exact neighborhood where I grew up.
Wow.
And it was really incredible. That's where I heard about 911. So yeah, kind of a strange, surreal place for me.
If that and when we started to attack Iraq, it's just weird when a war's going on. I don't know how else to put it. It's just very strange. And it causes a lot of emotions for people. And let me ask you one other question, completely trivial about nothing, but it's something I saw recently, and because you live in Moscow, I'll ask you. What I heard was that Moscow's a very 24-hour city in a way that cities in the U.S. just aren't, really. That you can go out shop, that there's stuff fair. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's very true. I've talked to people who live, for example, in Switzerland, and they're so upset because things start closing down at 6 o'clock, and Moscow's just go, go, go. You could always find, like right around me, we have at least one grocery store that's 24-hour, for example. The other ones stay open until 11 o'clock. I'm not much of a partier. I don't go out to the pubs like I used to, but
oh sure,
they're out until they're working until 6 in the morning, some of them. So yeah, it's definitely you talk about the city that never sleeps. That's definitely Moscow. But you have to remember too, it's a city of 15 million people. Really bustling place. It's just I'm on the outskirts, so I'm kind of separated from all that action. But yeah, it's definitely a city that really never sleeps. Even the shopping malls. Well, I mean, the malls and everything, they close at the normal time. But I mean, for example, in like Europe, I know a lot of places on Sundays, for example, close early. But here you don't have that. It's just a lot of places stay open until 11, much later as well.
Yes, yeah, and from my experience, like in the Netherlands, for instance, a lot of stuff would close. I was kind of surprised stuff would just close early.
Right.
And I've heard it's the opposite. But anyway, so Robert, you kind of built it into what you were talking about before, but I'm just going to do what I've been doing for a lot of people. Let me just leave the mic open. And what is your personal take on what's going on with this military action from Russia against Ukraine right now?
Okay. Well, I have to say that nobody agrees with war. First of all, okay, everybody abhors war, and there's very few people in the world, except probably for mercenaries who live by war, who would say that they enjoy it. I can understand how it happened. I was totally taken aback though and shocked that it did happen the way it did. I don't think anybody was really expecting it. I thought that Russia would be satisfied with declaring the independence of those two breakaway provinces, but they went full on. And when you look back and you look at it with hindsight, you understand that Putin, for example, he addressed the Munich Security Conference back in 2007. You're talking over a decade ago, warning them and telling them, guys, what are you doing? Why do you keep coming up to our borders? And he was just really snubbed and ignored, and they didn't take him serious. And I think really what Russia was doing was just biding its time and waiting for the moment when they knew that they had enough strategic advantage where they wouldn't be able to respond militarily to what they were doing, that they felt confident enough to carry out what they felt that they needed to do for their own security. It's not like Russia just woke up on February 24th and said, okay, you know what, we're gonna attack our neighbors, just because we feel like it. a lot of people think that way. It seems like that they just suddenly decided, oh, let's just attack. But it's actually something that's been brewing for many, many, many years. And Russia can't understand why this Cold War military bloc of NATO, which has grown to 30 countries, it now borders five countries border Russia. So they're starting to get quite concerned. They're starting to load up those countries with weapons. Then they were starting to do the same thing with Ukraine, which isn't even a NATO country yet. So they were starting to get very concerned by it, and they just eventually did what they felt that they had to do. Whether people agree with it or not, I don't think anybody should be. We'll put it this way: everybody basically had a warning that something like this could happen, and it certainly did.
Well, let me ask you about again, and again, just because you're a Moscow, it's very interesting to me, because of course I'm not, and the people listening aren't. But I'm going to give an example of a story that in the U.S. was like on a scale of 1 to 10 about how many people know about it. Okay, at the time, like the Lacey Peterson murder here was like a 9. Like everybody was talking about that. And that's not a big story, I assume, anywhere else in the world. But on the other hand, the Odessa massacre, where dozens of people were killed in a fire in Odessa, how known is that? No one knows about that story. The Odessa massacre is a 1 here. It's nothing.
Well, yeah, that was one thing that happened back in 2014, I believe, during the Maidan Revolution, when they succeeded in usurping the government and with U.S. backing, and it's very well known in Russia, and they point to that quite often as an indication as to how barbaric. I mean, from the Russian point of view, that the people they are, who they're fighting, how they're heartless, and these people were deliberately burned to death in this building, this administrative building. I forget all the exact details of it, but you pretty much summed it up. Dozens of people, exactly how many I forget.
And my question is, the average person knows about that story in Russia, right? That was big news there, correct?
Yeah, that was big news. That was big news.
Well, now, part of the reason I'm asking is because I was listening to, right before we came on, the New York Times did one of these things they can do on Twitter called a space, which is an audio conference. And they had a couple of so-called experts talking about Russians' reaction. The New York Times was hosting this. And they were acting like Russia, for instance, the average Russian doesn't know that this military action is taking place against Ukraine and doesn't know why. And just from the little bit I know, and I'm sort of confirming it with you, that was a big story. In other words,
well, I can tell you, Lee, that even more of a story than that is the story of the people of Eastern Ukraine being attacked constantly. Sometimes in the middle of the night. There was a story here of how a few families were on the beach, and they were deliberately attacked and killed in a shelling. And that's the story that probably more Russians would know. I mean, of course, I think a lot of Russians also know about the Odessa story, but I think more relevant to the story right now is the cases of people being deliberately killed and bombed, and really, like, people actually got to the point in Eastern Ukraine and those breakaway republics of Donetsk and Luhansk. They literally couldn't sleep in their homes at night. They were just fearful of them being targeted. So I don't know how they, a lot of them, just some horrible stories. And one thing that they did was, I saw this on a Telegram channel where they actually took, this was a few days ago, they took Ukrainian prisoners of war and they took them to these monuments that they had erected to the children, dozens of children who have been killed
Is that the Alley of Angels? Is that where that is?
It's possible. I don't recall the exact name, but
Yeah.
I just saw there's like a granite marble statue.
That sounds like the Alley of Angels. Yeah, go
Sounds
ahead.
right.
Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
So yeah, a lot of Russia. I mean, believe me, they're talking about it and they're debating it. And Russians are not, they're not a type of people who wouldn't keep up with something like this. It's on the news channels constantly here. So people are definitely talking about it. And yeah, you have Ukrainians who live in people with family from Ukraine, Ukrainians living here. So yeah, it's touched a nerve definitely, and it's sparked a lot of conversation. So yeah, Russians, they're very updates on the story.
And I noticed one thing Vladimir Putin said at the end of one of his speeches the other day. He said, this is too late. Basically, he said, this is too late in coming. This, basically he was saying, I should have done this before. And that struck me as he was talking to a lot of the people in Russia who think he should have done this earlier. Because, like you say, people don't like war, but they also don't like seeing people killed in places like Donbass. And do you think there was a sense among some people that what took so long?
Well, the way that this new government came to power, I'm sure your readers, your listeners are probably very up to date on it, but it started all back in 2014 when the Yanukovych presidency, he was forced from power. The story was that Ukraine was heading into the direction of Russia. They wanted to become more pro-Russian, and that's when I'm not going to speculate too much on exactly what happened at that point, but a lot of people say that it was the United States who helped to manipulate the situation and get the fighting going, and because they didn't want that, they didn't want Kiev leaning towards Moscow. The deal was that they were going to have an economic agreement with the West, and when Yanukovych indicated that he wasn't going to do that, that's when he was basically forced from power. So the whole thing really started from that point. And so what was really problematic for Russians is that, especially considering their history, how they fought against the Nazis and whatnot, there are actual neo-Nazi groups in Ukraine that are cooperating with, like, for example, the Azov Battalion, many others, and that's headed by somebody who actually is providing counseling to the Ukrainian military. So they're very concerned by that. They don't like that's one of the mottos is that they want to denazify, demilitarize Ukraine, and that's one of the reasons now they're saying that that's probably what Putin meant by that. I mean, I'm not going to put words into his mouth, but that's probably one of the reasons why is that they had this tendency to lean towards that direction, and for Russians and I'm sure for a lot of Ukrainians that's absolutely repulsive that they would be heading in that direction and being advised by neo-Nazis. That's just incredible considering the history of this particular place of Russia was. I mean, as you know, of course, they fought. A lot of their history right now is based on that. Everywhere you go in Russia and Moscow, you see statues to World War II and the tremendous sacrifices that they made, and how St. Petersburg held out against the Nazi army for, I don't know how many, I forget how many days, 400 plus days, maybe more, 800, I forget now, 800 some, long time. So, to imagine that they've got a neo-Nazi linked party on their border, it's just, for many Russians, it's impossible to believe and to tolerate.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the media and censorship. One thing that I see from people is I talk to people on Twitter, and again, they've probably never, like me, I've never been to Russia. So everything I know is secondhand, but at least I actually am curious and trying to get the facts straight. One of the things they say is that the media is so tightly controlled that everything's controlled by, all the media is controlled by Putin, and you can't. That someone said to me today that if I said anything against Putin and I was in Russia, I'd be put in jail. Whereas in the United States, I can say stuff, and I'm not. I guess they were saying I should be happy I'm not in jail.
You can talk about Putin as much as you want in the United States.
That's what they were saying. But it's hard to be pro-Putin, which I tend to be because I've done my research. But are people thrown in jail willy-nilly for, if you said something against Putin, would we hear you pulled away from the microphone suddenly, Robert?
No. That's ridiculous. And there are publications here that do criticize the government and without any problems. I mean, and you have protesters once in a while. They'll hold protests, and Putin himself has come out and said that it's important. It's a part of the democracy to be able to criticize. The thing is, though, is that if you did try to criticize Putin in an open place, you would probably be attacked. I mean, not physically necessarily, verbally, because so many people do agree with him, and he is extremely popular. I don't know exactly what his popularity ratings are now, but he is very popular with a lot of people. So that would probably, I mean, just simply because of that you would just, like, naturally, if you have with Trump, for example, if you start bad-mouthing Trump in a certain place, of course you're going to have problems. It just depends. So, but no, getting tossed in jail, that's ridiculous, to be honest. It wouldn't happen. It's not that type of, Russians are very open-minded. It's not the type of, they enjoy conversation, and you get into a taxi cab, for example, and you can have amazing conversation. Taxi cab drivers are like the most up-to-date people, and you get into a cab here, and because they're listening to the radio all day in their job, and they're talking to people. These people really have a thumb on a finger on the pulse.
Well, actually, that brings up another trivial point, but something I heard about Russia recently is that the customer service, people are like cab drivers, waiters, waitresses, people are very friendly. There's very good customer service. Is that true?
It's really true, and I can't recommend enough people visiting the place. It's amazing because everything is like new, and it wasn't necessarily that way like 10 years ago. Because they were just kind of getting into the groove. But now that they've got their training, and it was really difficult to get good customer service a while ago. But now, they're learning the ins and outs of it. They're very professional. Stores are clean, and shops are clean. And Moscow, I mean, I'm not speaking for all of Russia, but, I have been to other parts of Russia as well. And I'm just always surprised wherever I go. I was just in a little town not long ago called Ivanovo. And these places, like even on the outskirts of Moscow, there's a city called Tula. They're fixing up the waterfront. They're making it trendy. You got trendy cafes, coffee shops. It's a really livable. I'd have to say really livable. I mean, Moscow's expensive, first of all, but in terms of just comfort, like I could walk out my door right now. It's 9:50 here at night, and there are 4 grocery stores around me I can walk to. They're still open. I don't feel threatened. I don't feel any fear for my life. Crime on the streets is very low. So yeah, it's really, I would recommend, when all the insanity settles, if it ever does, I would recommend people coming for a visit, because it's not the Russia that you see on the news. There's nothing to be afraid of here.
Yeah, and I think that stuff, I call it trivial, but I really don't, in a sense, think it is. I think it humanizes. I think one of the ways propaganda can succeed is by dehumanizing people and by acting as though, I've seen people say, let's talk about food, for instance. I've seen people say on Twitter that Russia's about to be like North Korea. It's like people will all be out. Is anyone worried about running out of food right now? Is that a concern at all of anybody, even with the sanctions?
Well, for a while there, when there were the lockdowns and everything around the world, I was starting to, I was becoming like an amateur prepper. I was stocking up on the buckwheat, and buckwheat's very popular here. And I just think, even no matter where you are in the world, I think it's a smart thing to do, to have like kind of live like our grandparents did, to have a stock of backup food for at least a month, to be prepared, because you never know what's really going to happen. And people were panicking and they were buying up stuff and buying up the food supplies and whatever. But no, there's not right now. I think the situation, especially the fact that it's I think Russia's okay right now, and they have, for example, I'll just give you an example. There's a brand, a franchise, and it's probably all across Russia now. It's called Vkusville. It's difficult to say, but Vkusville, and it's all the products from there come from Russia. They're all Russian made now, and it's amazing that the Russians, and I think it's because of the sanctions that were placed on them. They learned how to produce a lot of things, like for example, cheese. They never were really good at producing quality cheese, and now they're making blue cheese and camembert cheese and different types of yogurts and things that it's not necessarily quite on par with what the French are making, but it's really good. And so if the bottom fell out of the global economy, Russia would still. It would do well. It would. It's just a huge country too. You've got Central Asia, which supplies a lot of their fresh fruit. I've had exotic fruits here that I've never even had in the United States, believe it or not, that come from Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, and as Azerbaijan. So there's no threat. You go into the grocery stores here, everything is loaded, and you don't feel anything like they're even close to having a problem, Lee, to be honest.
No, I'm also curious because, we had some U.S. there's a lot of, they've even banned Russian dogs from the dog show, and FIFA has kicked Russian teams out. So they're trying to isolate Russia. But I think because Russia's so big, I don't see how it's going to work. And we had General Motors come out recently and said, we're not going to send vehicles to Russia. And a lot of people in the U.S. were like, oh, well, that's going to hurt them. But then I saw people in Russia go, there's very few GM vehicles over here now. Is that right?
Yeah, well, the thing is that there's so many markets open here, Lee, and I think that's the one thing that shocks people the most. It shocks me to this day. When I do I don't get into Moscow as much as I used to. I'm in Moscow, but I'm way in the south, and I have to get on a train to actually get into the heart of it. But when I get there, I'm not kidding. The other day I was there. I met a friend for his birthday, and I was walking down the road. I saw 4 black Maybach Mercedes-Benzes in the course of my walking down the road. These cars are, what a Maybach is, right?
No, I do not.
It's like the highest end Mercedes out there, and very, very expensive. And you just see this. Not that I'm terribly attracted to it, but you do see this conspicuous wealth everywhere now, and it's become outrageous. And to be honest, it even kind of upsets me in a way, because I remember the old Moscow the way it was, and like old shops and places that I used to go to that are no longer there. They've been taken over. Now it's some kind of expensive boutique or. It's incredible. I mean, the wealth, the level of wealth, you immediately, the moment you're in the taxi heading from the airport going into Moscow, you feel it. It's everywhere.
And I'm curious, what kind of cell phones do people use? Is Huawei, the Chinese company, do people use Huawei phones, for instance? Because I saw that when I was in London a couple of years ago, that Huawei was a brand you could get in London. No one's got a Huawei phone here. It's all Apple, or the Samsung's got a new phone out. But what happens? Is there a Russian-made cell phone, or do they use Huawei, the Chinese?
A lot of people have the iPhones, and it's become kind of like a status thing to have the iPhone. And as you're saying, the Huawei, they'll have that. Myself, I've got a Samsung, all kind of different varieties. But a lot of people go for the iPhones. They try to get those, and I think a lot of it is just because of the status. It's becoming that type of a place where, people are concerned about their status and how many how many lenses you have on your camera and everything. That's becoming a big deal for people. So you don't see, it's another depressing thing. You don't see Russians, because it's one of these places where, Russia's just famous for their reading and their writers, and you don't see people reading on the trains anymore, like you did before on the subways. Everybody's got their head buried in their phones. So
the modern world. Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
I actually took a picture of a young girl the other day reading a book, because you just don't see it happening anymore.
Right. Yes. And of course you could take a picture of it because your phone has a camera on it.
Yes, exactly.
Which I'm old enough to remember when your phone was just attached by a cord, and that was it. That was just a phone. But
yeah, the rotary dial. I saw a video the other day. I'm sorry, just real quick, a funny story. It's on YouTube still. You can find it. There's a video of two kids are like 14 years old, and their parents challenge them. They give them a rotary dial phone, and they challenge them. They say, you have 5 minutes to figure out how to make a phone call on this rotary dial phone. I thought they figured it out immediately. The two of them could not figure out how to use this rotary dial phone. It was hysterical.
Yeah, I had that. My son Shane, who used to be the co-host of the show, Fault Lines here, we were at Disney a few years ago, and Disney World, and they, as an experiment, they held up a 45 single.
Uh-huh.
And they said, okay, what is this? And I thought my son was hipper than that, because, me, it's my son. I thought, no. But it's an age thing. He had no idea what it was. None. Zero.
Wow. Well, the vinyls are making a comeback now.
Yes, I bought my kids record players for Christmas. Indeed. It's just,
that's great.
Yeah, we'll see. And I bought my younger kids a picture disc of Boston's first album. It's a very good picture disc. I'm just saying.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
There's nothing like that sound of the diamond tip needle hitting that vinyl plastic, and you get that crackling sound in the speaker, and it's great.
Yeah, no, I wanted my kids to start to have that experience. But anyway, hey, Robert, fantastic conversation. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. I think you get a very good sense, again, of the reality on the ground, because what we're subjected to right now in America is so much propaganda on this. The other thing is, I don't know if you know this, in the U.S., Russia's lost this thing. It's a botched invasion. Do you know that's the media over here?
Well, that's what I've heard, that like on Twitter, for example, Russia's losing the war, but in reality, it's completely, like, right now. Well, anyways, it's not nearly true, and I think in a few days the reality is going to set in, and I think it's going to be over.
No. Let me ask you about that. Just in the last seconds here. When you say you think it'll be over, do you think that Russia today, just this morning, started pulling out, I'll say, the big guns? In other words, they weren't using their best weapons at first, and now they're starting to use some of the serious weapons. And so, do you think this is that Ukraine is going to surrender? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, as far as I know, right now, Kiev is basically surrounded, the capital, Kiev.
That sounds right, yes.
And I just saw video on Telegram. It was amazing. They showed a satellite image of the convoy of Russian military vehicles heading towards the capital, and it just went on and on and on. And they were showing a woman in her car was filming them with her phone, and it went on for, like, I think they said 40 miles. This convoy, it is just huge, and so they don't seem to be. I think you're right. I don't think I haven't really seen too much, like, fighter jets and things like that. I'm sure they're there, but it seems like they're trying to keep this. They're trying to keep the civilian losses to a minimum. They're only trying to target military installations. They're not doing, like, these shock and awe campaigns that some countries are noted for, like, where you just level everything and then go in and so-called liberate it. So they're really trying to keep down, and it's actually working to the disadvantage of the North. I mean, it makes it more difficult for the soldiers, of course, when you do that, because then it probably leads to more like guerrilla warfare, and you're fighting door to door, apartments to apartment buildings, so that makes it more tricky. But in terms of the losses, I've seen different figures, and Russia, of course, they are sustaining some losses, but overall, it looks like it's. I would say like within days, it's going to probably be over within. I would say within 5 days. That's my prediction, if not sooner.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that'd be great. And Robert, for you, I don't. It doesn't sound like you're in danger, but I'll still say stay safe in case you trip on some buckwheat or something. Don't have. I'd hate to see that. But anyway, Robert Bridge, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Lee. It's always a pleasure.
Okay. Talk to you later. Bye bye. You're listening to The Backstory.
Want to talk? Get in touch with us at radio@sputniknews.com.
So, Sean, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, Bob, that's easy. I want to talk about the need to stop the development of self-driving cars.
Again, Sean, you're driving me nuts. I think the self-driving car thing's already out of the gate.
No. It's never too late. See, now the leading experts in the field, I mean, just pick one, whichever one, leading experts have repeatedly warned us about the dangers of artificial intelligence. Look, I'm telling you, man, we have to stop the robots by any means necessary.
I see what you did there.
Yep.
Tune into our show By Any Means Necessary daily from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Radio Sputnik. And don't forget to call in at 3:20 p.m. to our studio number 202-521-1320.
And if you miss us live, check us out on SputnikNews.com, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date on the latest political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us.
Feeling kind of blue, but maybe also kind of red, and kind of purple, and kind of alone? You've got a friend on Radio Sputnik. Tune into Political Misfits from 12 to 2 Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, for news, politics, and culture without the two-party bias. Catch us daily on 105.5 in Washington, D.C., or 102.9 or 104.7 in Kansas City. Or find us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your news.
Are you bored? Are you lonely? Do you need a hug? Well, we can't give you that, but we can keep you up to date on Radio Sputnik.
And we are back and we are live. Once again, I want to thank Robert Bridge. Great interview with Robert over there in Moscow. And again, I do like to bring that stuff because I do want to there's so much BS right now. And a lot of it's BS at a basic level. I was talking to someone earlier on Twitter, and they were saying, Rod, they were telling me that they have a colleague in Moscow who says Putin's got a 30% approval rating. Now, I'll put it like this, even the New York Times is admitting that he's got a 70% approval rating or so, 68, something like that, on the war. So here's what I'm saying. If 30% of people, I'll put it like this. First off, 30% would be, I think, higher than Joe Biden right now, wouldn't it, Rod?
Yeah, no, definitely, by a lot.
And here's what I'm saying. Any policy short of like free cash or something like that Joe Biden would put out is going to be less popular than Joe Biden. Does that make sense? Just logically. So the idea, so many people, they're saying stuff like somebody, some knucklehead on Twitter, by the way, hi knucklehead, is telling me that if you criticize Putin in Russia, you'll go to jail. And that's not true at all. Now, I'm not saying if you criticize Biden right now, you'll go to jail yet. But I do think, and we got Manila Chan coming up at the top of the hour. Now, the latest breaking news right now involves Sputnik and RT directly, which is Apple. Tim Apple's, Tim Cook over there at Apple, has banned the RT and Sputnik apps from the App Store. So if you're an iPhone user, they banned you from the iPhone store, unless you're in Russia. Then you can still get the app. But I'm about to do a technical lesson. And if you're watching on video, I'll be able to show it to you visibly. And you'll be able to see right now you're looking at my iPhone. But I'm going to show everybody how to do something that you may not know you can do. And it's not just with our site, it's with any site. One of the advantages to the app is it's quicker access to the app, to the RT site. Does that make sense, Rod? Like, if you got the app, you can get to, you don't have to type in Sputnik.com or whatever on your web browser. But there's a feature that's built into your iPhone. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the Safari web browser, which is Apple's web browser, and I'm going to open up the Sputnik app that I've already entered. So here's the Sputnik app. You can see it on the videos portion, which, by the way, don't forget, we were censored yesterday. Now, down at the bottom, there's the button. It's right in the middle. It looks like a square with an arrow pointing out through it. That's the share button. And if you have the website up, you can do this with any website, and you click on share, it'll bring up a number of options. And one of the options down here is add to home screen, it says. Just scroll down on your options. And so if you want to add to home screen, if I hit that, it'll come up and confirm that I want to do that. And in my case, yes, I do want to do that. Let me see. And now right at the top, I'm going to hit the add button. And now what's happened is I've got a lot of apps on this freaking phone. So I'm scrolling to the end of all my apps. Anyway, somewhere on here, I can't even find it. But what it does is it adds an icon to your phone. So now you've got direct access to the website. So if you click on that now, I don't know where it is on my phone. But it doesn't matter if I have too many damn apps on here. And by the way, you might still be able to download the Sputnik app, which it's spent some time making nice. But there's how you can get around it. The internet, one of the things that's neat about the internet is it was actually designed to route around censorship. So, Tim Apple, F you. If you think you were stopping people from getting the truth, Tim Apple, you were in fact not. Yeah, I'm still going to call him Tim Apple because remember when Trump did that?
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, so I still like that. So Tim Apple, take that. And it does mean I'm going to buy that new Samsung S22 phone too. By the way, Google, who controls the Android operating system, it's not like I expect those mother hubbers to be any better. I expect them to jump on and join in with Tim Apple because Eric Google over there, Google is worse. They were like Hillary's IT department during the 2016 election. And by the way, I'm going to point out again, Hillary Clinton yesterday was talking about aiding and abetting, which is treason terminology. And I'm seeing nuts attack me. By the way, any of you people attacking me, you're Nazi defenders. You're defending the most violent Nazis, disgusting people. These Banderites, that's who you're defending. And you're defending that philosophy. And when Putin talks about it, Banderites, how many people do you think have any freaking idea what Putin's talking about when he says Banderites, Rod? What would you say of the American public?
Honestly, maybe 3% or less.
Yeah, I think 3%'s very optimistic on your part. Now, we've been talking, and this is, I'll say this too. I have the same position that I've had for years. I've been exposing the truth about Ukraine and about the 2014 Maidan. And I'll tell you who else fits in this. We got Jason Goodman joining us at the top of the show. Jason and I do a show on Patreon. And tomorrow, I can tell you, we'll be talking about how Russiagate, that narrative fits in. But you know who reared his ugly rat-like head today is Bill Browder. Did you see Browder on with Christina Anandpour on CNN?
Yeah, I was actually going to send that to you because it came up on my YouTube feed.
Right. So Bill Browder, and here's the thing. Feel free. If you see a couple of clips, grab them for tomorrow. That's fine. But a friend of mine said to me, if you read the comments section, it's all people praising Bill Browder and the Magnitsky Act. People who fall in hook, line, and sinker for the Browder propaganda. See, because some people like to say that this started in 2014, and it's not that they're wrong. The Maidan is what led to the murders of people, innocent people in the Donbass. But I think this really started when Vladimir Putin had Mikhail Khodorkovsky arrested. Because all of the geopolitical stuff, Rod, and there's a lot of it, that deals with big, weighty issues. But let me tell you something I learned a long time ago. And I learned this where a company that I worked with broke up, and what everyone was saying publicly was there was a difference of agreement over the direction of the company and technology and stuff like that. But you know what it was actually about? It was about a girl. The president and the vice president got into a fight over a girl they both liked. And the girl liked the vice president more than the president. And that's not good in a company. Does that make sense? You see the problem there, right?
Yeah, wars have been started over things like this.
Right. And what I'm getting at is that sometimes things that seem like big, lofty, people go, well, this is about energy money. And you're not wrong. This is about the security of Russia. And you're not wrong. But I'm 100% convinced of this. When Mikhail Khodorkovsky, at one point, one of the richest guy in Russia, now closely associated with George Soros. Have you seen the footage of Khodorkovsky when he was in prison, in the cage, in the back of the courtroom?
Yeah, I've seen that before.
Okay, so this is my guess. And again, let's see if we can get Khodorkovsky on the show tomorrow, Rod. Reach out to him. Tell him we'd love to have him on Sputnik. Let's just see what happens. But I'm convinced of this. When Khodorkovsky was sitting in prison, he was thinking to himself, I'm going to get that Putin. He was mad personally. Now, again, this is conjecture on my part, but I don't think it's a wild supposition on my part to assume that the guy was upset about things. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, I can actually compare it to, if you remember, the White House has that event, I forget the name of it, where a comedian hosts it. They invited Donald Trump. And
yes.
And his wife said that he was really upset after that and that he vowed to run for president to get back at Barack Obama. And I don't think that's, out of the realm of
the correspondence dinner you're talking about.
Yeah, the correspondent. That's apples compared to this, where he's Khodorkovsky's financing a war and starting all this other stuff.
Well, Khodorkovsky clearly is on the record of wanting to get rid of Putin. And I'm convinced some of it, at least, is purely personal on Khodorkovsky's part. And I'm not even saying it like I don't get it. I get it, I guess. I mean, I've never been Russia's richest man, so I only get it so far. But I'm sure he was pissed off. And if you see the stuff he says about Putin, he wants to replace Putin. You follow me? Khodorkovsky's been very clear. He, in his Open Russian Society, he wants to replace him. So I'm convinced of this. And I'll tell you who else it was personal for. I noticed this back when my second wife and I were first together. That's a little confusing. But at the beginning of my second wife and I's relationship, the Iraq War, very quickly after my second wife and I got together, George Bush was elected. And I said to her, I remember the conversation distinctly. And I said to her, well, you watch, we're going to end up going to war with Iraq. Now, this is before 9/11. And my wife was like, what are you talking about? And I said, when you look at George W. Bush, he operates out of vengeance for his father. It's very Shakespearean in a sense. But let me give an example. You gave the example of when Trump decided to run. George W. Bush, was very mad, and he ran for governor of Texas after Ann Richards, the Democrat former governor, made fun of his father, George H.W. Bush, at the Democratic National Convention. That's when she had the line, poor George, he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Remember that line at all, Rod?
Yeah, I remember. I've seen that played before.
Well, I'll tell you who really remembers it is George W. Bush. Because at that point, he's like, okay, I'm going to be the governor of Texas. And he'd never been interested in politics before. And the reason I knew we were going to attack Iraq, this is way before 9/11, is because if you think about, I remember it very distinctly. Because at the time I was doing training videos and video production. And I used a picture of George W. Bush as an example picture in the training video. And my partner in that, Rex, said, I don't know if you want to use that picture. He said, you don't know what's going to happen. It's politics. And he said, and I said to Rex, no, let's use it. After the first Iraq, the Saddam Hussein war that George H.W. Bush started, do you remember the point where George H.W. Bush's approval rating was like at 60%? Remember that, Rod?
No, I remember that.
He was hugely popular. And my argument to my partner was, no. George H.W. Bush, look at his approval numbers. That's not going to slip. Well, it did slip. And the reason, and George Carlin has a very funny bit about this, where he compares the Bush name to hair that's around your naughty bits if you're a lady. I'm just saying. Maybe a dude, but okay, I'm not gender, racist against anybody. But I'm saying he talked about the name Bush, and he talked about how the terminology that was being used was very sexual. We can't pull out. It's funny in Carlin's bit. But my point is that George H.W. Bush was thought of as a weakling for not going all the way with Hussein. And I knew that W would want to rescue his father's reputation. And sure enough, I was right. That's exactly what happened. But sometimes this stuff is personal. And I see this Khodorkovsky versus Putin thing. Even Putin, I don't know, Vladimir. See, if you can't get Khodorkovsky on tomorrow, get this guy Vladimir Putin on, Rod. We'll take a short break. When we come back, Jason Goodman's joining us, and Manila Chan will be with us next hour here on The Backstory.
listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
And we are back. I'm Lee Stranahan. This is the best damn radio show in the world. 105.5 FM, AM 1390. This is The Backstory. Once again, I want to thank Robert Bridge, straight out of Moscow, joining us in the first hour. This hour, we are joined on a Truth Tuesday by our guest co-hosts on Tuesdays in the second hour, my friend Jason Goodman. Hey, Jason, how you doing?
I'm great, Lee. How are you?
I'm a little delirious, I'll be honest, slightly punch drunk.
Why's that?
I'll explain. Well, you know what? Because this is all I do now.
What do you mean?
This war thing, I've become obsessed with it.
Yeah.
And when I'm not doing the show, I'm researching, and a lot of it goes into the show.
Yeah.
And my show and outlets that I work for are being censored. I feel like somebody, at like one of those Indiana Jones things where you're running down a hall, but the floor is falling all around you. You know what I'm talking about, Jason? You know.
Yes. I mean, listen, Lee, it's happening. The social engineering and the lockdown of information on social media and mainstream media surrounding this Ukraine war is impressive, even in the context of what they were able to achieve with COVID-19. It is astounding how almost no one in U.S. media, outside of you and a limited number of people in the sort of alternative independent news space, almost no one is talking about the facts of what Putin has said. They are just going forward with this message that out of nowhere, he invaded because he's bloodthirsty. And I mean, it's the most absurd, unsupported series of claims, but people are eating it up. They're just gobbling it up.
Well, so I'll talk about that because I want to talk to you about some of the mind control propaganda, the Bluebird artichoke, MK Ultra level of mind control propaganda that we've been seeing for years. And when that fails, they just want to punch you in the face or throw you into a cage.
Yeah.
And it's serious. But we got a great guest joining us at the bottom of the hour from RT. Manila Chan will be joining us, Jason.
Great.
I don't think you've ever talked to Manila, have you?
No, I haven't. I've seen her on RT.
Manila. Right. She's a brilliant news person. Very experienced. Also, I'll say easy on the eyes. I'm not going to lie. Right? There's a reason. I have a face for radio. It's very clear. Anyone looking at me. But we'll talk about mind control and propaganda right after this. Why don't you say the name of the show? I'll give you the boom, Jason.
The Backstory.
There we go. I want to quickly, before we talk about this mind control propaganda stuff, let's go to Tammy in D.C. Tammy, 202-521-1320. What is on your mind?
Yes, hi. I'm not really obsessed. I did listen to Putin because I can't get on my TV. However, I do listen to it on my phone. And I'm like, wow, he has so much history. He said, well, now I'm saying. And he said, you all have a listening problem. And I was totally stunned because I do remember back what happened in 2007. I do remember that. However, and I also remember 2014. And I said, and my son said, Mom, he was talking, he said, Putin is wrong. I said, no, Putin is right. Because I'm with Putin because I would do the same darn thing that was me. He had everything written down. Biden, the Democrats, Obama, all of them, they ought to be ashamed of themselves.
Yep.
No, I agree, Tammy. Great call and very brave position. And, you know, your son said that, right? That's what you said? but you love him, right? So that's nothing. Keep that up and forgive him in the sense you're a parent. You got to with your kids because, as we'll talk about in a second, the propaganda has been so thick that I don't blame anyone for being on the wrong side of this. But I want to make sure before we talk to Jason more about the propaganda. 202, great call, Tammy. Thanks so much. God bless. 202-521-1320. Tarif, what is on your mind?
Thank you for taking my call. First, I'd like to say free joining signs. I got 4 comments. I got to get through all 4 of them, if you don't mind, Lee. The first comment, Mexico, Turkey is not going to sanction Russia. Brazil don't want to talk bad about Russia either and some other countries. The second comment, Russia's going to be holding conferences for the next months, coming up months, dealing with fascism, to how to counter fascism.
Wait, Tarif, let me stop you for 1 second, then I'll let you go on. Because, again, the problem with Tarif is you have too many good points all in a row, and I'm old and have had strokes. I'll forget them. Let me say something about the Turkey thing that's significant. Yesterday, sort of like they were going to Taco Bell, kind of, Ukraine submitted an application to EU for membership.
Yeah.
And EU accepted it.
Yeah.
But let me point out with what Tarif's saying, this is important, he's right. To get into the EU, they need unanimous consent. Turkey being out of this is going to spell trouble for them at NATO because Turkey's a NATO nation. But with the EU, you've got countries like Poland saying, we're not going to let NATO put weapons through. So I want people to watch that because getting into EU is just because you put it in the application and it's been accepted, they've got an uphill battle because not every EU nation is going to be in favor of Ukraine joining. Does that make sense, Jason?
Well, not only that, it seems like an obvious kind of provocation. It's like one of these little procedural things that he can do to be like, haha, now we're in the EU. And it's like, oh, you're just trying to make more war over there. It doesn't seem like a smart thing to me.
So it affects NATO more than EU because Turkey's a NATO nation. The fact that they're not opposing Russia actively tells you, as we've been saying for a while, there's no freaking way. A lot of this is about NATO currently, but there's no way that Ukraine's getting to NATO right now, and I don't see how they get into the EU. Tarif, go ahead. Continue your second point. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, I got 2 more after the second one. My second one is this. Russia's going to be having conferences in Russia with a whole bunch of other countries from Africa, Central America, and India, China, dealing with how to counter fascism, the rise of fascism, how to counter that. Third comment, the reason why Biden administration is trying to push for the JCPOA deal, they're trying to take the chip off the table from China and Russia, dealing with Iran, because Iran can close the Strait of Hormuz, and the U.S. won't be able to do anything about it. If they do that, then the U.S. economy can collapse. That's why they're going to push for the JCPOA deal to get it signed through. My last comment is I was watching Pepe Escobar. He just said something after the Biden speech tonight. Russians is going to hit back with their own sanctions. And some of the analysts out there are saying that Russia might go all the way and maybe cancel gas to the rest of Europe just to hit back at them like that. Or maybe some other sanction, but that's the nuclear option. That happened, then the price of oil going to go so way up there. You're going to see tough times in the U.S. and everywhere else.
Tariq, do you think Bitcoin is blunting the force of some of these sanctions? It's been surging up today, perhaps wealthy Russians protecting some of their assets.
It's not just wealthy Russians, Canadians, what else? Slovakians, countries that came out against people that's in support of Russia, also in support of NATO, talking about freezing people's accounts. That's why you have so many people going into Bitcoin.
Right. Right.
Because you can still transfer funds to survive. That's the same thing. Remember, you remember when McAfee was alive? John McAfee was alive?
I think he's still alive.
He may be still alive. Boatload of Monero. Now, Monero.
Yeah,
it's way better than Bitcoin and Ethereum because you can't be tracked.
Right. It's specifically designed to anonymize the user. I don't know about better, but that is a feature of it. And, all of this stuff remains in this kind of gray area where it hasn't, yes, it's mainstream and that everybody knows about it, but we haven't really seen that big precedent-setting criminal case about Bitcoin, and governments are still evaluating it and things like that. It's interesting to see it surge, though, when these sanctions come on in Russia.
Yeah, that is true. Russia and China's working on their own digital currency, but they're going to control. And they might go with the ruble. If they go with the ruble or gold or silver or maybe Bitcoin or another digital, you never know. They can play this as many ways as they want. They're surviving they're surviving what happened yesterday, dealing with the currency dropping 30%. Right.
Right.
Now the West is freaking out. Now you got about Switzerland talking about freezing bank accounts. That's something they never done before. Joining Freeland talking about joining NATO. What that tells you is this: what the analyst was talking about through today, Alice McCurris, Pepe Escobar, and a host of other analysts. NATO in the U.S. is freaking out. They done yesterday was going to basically have a revolution in Russia. What's saving Russia is because Russia got a whole bunch of gold saved up. They only got like 20% of debt. They're not in debt like us with trillions of dollars. They got backing them. They got Iran, Mexico, Brazil, Pakistan going to sign a deal with them for gas in 2 tons of wheat. Pipeline. They want India want to build a pipeline to Russia to get some of that gas. Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam. Then you got China.
So do you think Joe Biden just fractured the dollar and created a de facto alternate economy that'll ultimately hurt the dollar?
Yes, sir. That's what all the analysts talking.
I think so. I think so. Joe Biden is the stupidest president we've ever had.
Well, I got to say, but this is, I'm not disagreeing with that point, but I'm just saying that this was inevitable. And that's why we had that woman, I'm sure you saw, Jason, the member of parliament from Ukraine, Deborah from Arizona, we'll get to you right after this. The woman from the member of parliament, the blonde, who was on Fox saying, we're fighting for the New World Order. You saw her, right, Jason?
I missed that, but wow.
No, and I'm not making it up. She literally said, we're fighting for the New World Order. And let me tell you something about her. She's not a woman who does not speak a well English. She's somebody who was at the World Economic Forum. So she's been there speaking on stakeholder countries and stuff like that. So when she says the New World Order, she knows what she's talking about. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Like she really does.
Well, and Lee, before we started, Rod was telling me that you guys had John Earl Sullivan, Jaden X, on as a guest earlier. Is that correct?
Not today, but maybe. I think we have. That sounds right.
Perhaps I might be speaking out of school.
No,
maybe.
I just don't remember.
I understood that it was today.
Wait, Rod, can you clarify this? Am I forgetting a guest, or is that what's happening?
Oh, he was on fault lines today, this morning. Fault lines.
Oh, fault lines.
Gotcha.
Sorry. And so, Rod, he is in Kiev. John Sullivan is in Ukraine.
I believe he's on the ground in Ukraine. Yeah, that's from what he was saying on his
How is that? So this is the guy, Lee, who was video recording the murder of Ashley Babbitt He appeared on Crowdsource the Truth, where I interviewed him and asked him a lot of questions about videos he's produced on his YouTube channel, where he's telling people how to dress in black blocs so that they're not detected by the police, and how to use weapons. And granted, they're within his Second Amendment rights to do these things. However, it's quite incriminating in terms of the allegation that this guy might be some sort of paramilitary operative who's, infiltrating peaceful protests and causing mayhem.
Well, I haven't talked to him, so I don't know much about him. But I'll counter that in a second, because I was listening to Woody Guthrie earlier, and I was thinking about this. And I'll talk to you about it in just 1 second. But I want to get to Deborah in Arizona, 202-521-1320. Deborah, thanks for waiting. What's on your mind?
Hello, gentlemen. I just wanted to share that Arizona Wendy Rogers has stood up. She was blaming the Germans and EU for all this stuff going on in Ukraine. And today the Arizona State Senate is going to censor her because of her comments that she's siding with Russia.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, Carmine apparently knows her, Carmen Sabia, who co-hosts on Monday. So we were trying to get her on. But that is a gutsy move. And I'll say this, too. Deborah, thanks for the call from Arizona, updating us on that situation. People should be aware all of the censorship goes one way. Have you noticed that, Jason?
Yeah, you're not allowed to disagree or you get censured.
And I'll tell you, this sounds so much like COVID and Russiagate.
Right.
I think a lot of people are seeing it. We'll talk about that in 1 second. 202-521-1320. David in New York, what's on your mind today?
Hi. I have 3 questions so that you may be able to shed some light on. But personally, preface by saying I really value your show, and as well as a number of other shows on our Sputnik and RT. But the questions are, the first one is, well, I hope it doesn't happen, but is there a possibility that Sputnik.com itself and RT.com, the websites, could get taken down in the U.S.? And that's the first question. And let me go to the second one. If that happens, is that legal given our Constitution, and could it be contested in court? And the third question is, if it happens, is there a plan B that, because I don't want to lose you guys as a source of news and information, and so those are my 3 questions.
Well, so the answer, my answer is I don't know. I think they could try to do something like that. I think they would lose in court ultimately. I do think, and furthermore, if that happens, do I still have a right? Because here's the thing. And I don't want my boss to hear this and get the wrong idea, but I have the same opinion whether I have this job or not. Does that make sense, Jason?
Absolutely, Lee. And if I may, I certainly don't speak for RT or Sputnik. I am not employed by either of those companies. I don't receive any payments for my appearances on this show, but I would like to report on my personal experience in trying to view RT right now. Now, Lee, I'm in Manhattan, where I have an extremely reliable Verizon fiber optic internet connection, 980 megabits per second, both directions. And for the past several days, I've been trying to look at news on RT, and the site was under DDoS attack for several days, couldn't see it at all. Then RT, it appears, put in a DDoS protection mechanism where you had to say, I'm not a robot, and that worked for a day, and then it was under DDoS. The I'm not a robot thing was under DDoS attack. I couldn't access that. Then they solved that, but every single thing you wanted to click on, you had to hit that I'm not a robot. And now I'm looking at it right now, and something is clearly wrong because the layout is not, it's like, doesn't look like RT usually looks. There's some kind of attack going on RT right now. And my response to the caller's question is that you would not see the elements that we are under rule of and are doing these things act like Joe Biden coming on TV and saying, hey, we're banning RT. It would take the form of what we're seeing now, these types of cyber attacks that disable the thing, but are...
And what Apple did, banning the app.
Whatever, right? That lawfare. They'd either have some cutout that's a criminal group do it through DDoS attack, or, as Lee said, some corporate actor do it under civil whatever, and Apple can take whatever kind of civil action you're going to throw at them, and they're not the government, so what are you going to do?
Yeah, and so luckily I'm not in management, and I feel badly for the people in management at RT and Sputnik out trying to deal with this. Everything is on a day-by-day, almost hour-by-hour basis. But let me just talk about this broadly, Jason, from a sort of tech point of view. I mentioned before the internet was designed to route around censorship. And I mentioned Woody Guthrie briefly because I've been listening to the Woody Guthrie song, All You Fascists Are Bound to Lose. And the song was not, hey, fascists, you just lost, but it's you're bound to lose. So fascists are bound to lose on the information battle. And here's why, Jason. We saw this with COVID-19. The information warfare space was flak-filled for a long time. But you know what? Eventually the truth got out.
Yeah,
Does that
that's
make
true.
sense?
You're right. But it did a lot of damage, Lee. And the problem that we have here is, I think at least the people that are calling in and listening, and you and I on this show agree that this is the United States deep state, as Putin alleges, creating an anti-Russia project that's trying to destroy him, destroy his government, and destroy the way of life that he's trying to create for Russian people there at the behest of people like Khodorkovsky, Soros.
But let me ask you a question, Jason. I want to, because I'm going to get here real quickly. When you talk to people, when you look at people, think about what you know personally. Are you finding more people going, you know what? I'm starting to think this Russia thing, that Russia's right, that Putin's telling the truth.
No,
not
at all.
You're not hearing anybody say that?
Well, I mean, again, I'm a bit of a skewed, people who are crowdsourced the truth viewers, yes. I thought you meant just out in general, around in the street, and friends and family.
I'll tell you what I'm not hearing, and seriously, I am not hearing anybody say, you know what, when I started this thing, I started pro-Putin and pro-Russia. Then I looked into it. They're liars.
Right.
And now I'm 100% pro-Ukraine. Have you heard anybody say that?
No. And in fact, when I went up to a protest at the Russian embassy here in New York the other day, there were a lot of Ukrainian people there protesting. And I asked one of the guys, what do you say about Putin's allegations that he's denazifying Ukraine? And the guy got angry and he said, oh, you're talking about history. My niece is there. She's 2 years old. And it's like, look, I get it. That's sad, scary, emotional. I don't want a 2-year-old kid being exposed to war. But I just asked a question, and he says he doesn't want to talk about history. This is very relevant. Are there Nazi terrorist criminal gangs there or no? And the guy doesn't want to talk about it. So that's very telling in my view. And Joe Biden does the same thing.
And what I'm saying is I'm seeing the trend I'm seeing. I'm not seeing anybody say it was like COVID-19. The more people looked into it, you didn't see people saying, you know what? I'm more convinced than ever that we need lockdowns.
Right.
I didn't hear anybody saying that.
Correct.
Now,
I agree.
It goes slowly, but I want people to realize, and I was warning people about this for years. During Russiagate, I said the Republican narrative pushed by guys like Dan Bongino, that Lego head.
That's a good name for him.
A friend of mine pointed out, doesn't Dan Bongino look like a Lego character?
You're right. I get it. I like it.
He does. But I was saying the Democrat narrative on Russiagate was Russia's evil and Trump is hooked up with him.
Right.
The Republican narrative is Russia's evil, but Trump isn't hooked up with him.
Right. Exactly.
And both of them were Russia's evil. And I pointed out, again, I sleep well at night, but eventually. It takes me a while. I've been up literally till 1, 2. Sometimes you'll see I'm up in the middle of the night. And because I am, frankly, obsessed with this, because I'm trying to follow it, partially because it's a story I've been in the middle of for a few years now. Nothing about my opinion has changed. This Nazi thing that Putin's talking about, Jason, how long have you heard me talk about Ukrainian Nazis?
Yeah, I mean, as long as you've been talking about it, several years.
Right. So in other words, it's not like I'm buying into Putin's. Some people are acting like that I was living my life, and then I looked at my paycheck and said, I better agree with Putin on this. Yeah. You're idiots. Yeah. I've got a clear, go back 3 years, I'm talking about Banderites.
Yep.
I didn't hear it.
There's articles about it, right? There was an article in the National Post where they were upset that the Canadian ambassador was having some ceremony with these guys, and they spoke about their history with the Nazis. We've seen Douglas Valentine, who wrote that book about the CIA as organized crime, talking about how Operation Paperclip, it's known that there were these Nazi...
Aerodynamic, yes.
Yeah, planted cells that were intended to be activated, and Putin is saying that's what's going on. He's delivered...
And that's what I was talking about. I was trying to understand why so many Ukrainians were involved with Hillary Clinton and their history on that. And you can't discuss the history without discussing the Banderites. But it's not the case that that Putin declared war and then I said, well, I think I'm going to go with that.
Yeah.
I actually know what the hell I'm talking about.
Definitely. Here's something for people to consider when they're talking to friends, or if they're, I know this is very difficult, but, the essence of this is essentially that Putin has presented his claim. The claim is there are Nazi terrorist cells that are terrorizing people who are asking for our help, and we are just doing a peacekeeping operation. That's the claim. We do not hear Joe Biden answering that claim. He's saying, well, Putin's invading for no reason. We know that's false.
Right.
Putin has given a reason. The question is, do you agree with the facts of his reason, or do you disagree with those facts because you have some other facts that we haven't seen yet? And they're not doing that. So right away, you really should be questioning Joe Biden and all the people who are saying, don't pay attention to Putin. And what did Hillary say? Anyone who gives aid and comfort to Putin. She's basically declared war in the court of public opinion on Russia and Putin, and has done so for the past 6 years or so, or more.
Right, and I pointed out the centrality of Hillary Clinton to the Russiagate narrative and Bill Clinton's connections to Strobe Talbot and anti-Russia stuff going back decades. I've been talking about this for years. This is not a new position. So here's what it is. Maybe some of you guys, not my audience, I love my audience, but I'm talking about you Mother Hubbards on Twitter. Maybe some of you guys are just hearing about this, but not me. And I can prove it because I've been doing the radio show for years now, and also holding on for years now. Ingrid from D.C., thanks for your patience, Ingrid. What's on your mind?
First, I want to thank you for all your work for years on this and for doing the deep dive. I really appreciate it. You're very rare. I think apparently Anonymous, whatever they are, have announced that they are doing cyber attacks on RT, for one thing. I've been following a fellow who's a retired American veteran. His name's Russell, 2 S's, 2 L's, Bentley, like the car. And he's been living in Donbass, in Donetsk. And he's actually working and perhaps fighting alongside the Donetsk Republic forces. And he has a YouTube channel. He's been working a little bit with a young German journalist named Anna Lipp, L-I-P-P. And I'm a little concerned about him, but he would actually come on your show, if Putin and Khodorkovsky don't.
What's your concern about him? His safety, or that he might be...
I'm concerned about him because yesterday his last video, he was 4 minutes long, and he was with some guys in tanks, and they were heading off to Mariupol.
Oh, wow.
So,
wow.
And Mariupol is like Azov Battalion Central. That's Nazi Central. So anything you see Mariupol getting attacked, cheer.
But see, this is very interesting, Lee, because, you're talking about how central the Clintons are to Russiagate, and I agree. The aspect of this story that I think I've become, first of all, most interested in and most closely associated with is the social engineering that's gone on through social media here in the United States, and how that also is very closely tied to the Clintons through the Brookings Institution and other things and other companies. So our caller asked, what is anonymous? It's, it's understood to be a hacker collective, but as the name suggests, its membership is totally anonymous, which inherently invites anyone at all to act under that banner claiming they're anonymous. And, what the hell is the ideology of that? It could be anybody doing anything hackery, and it's this sort of vague thing. And we don't know who made it, who's in it, who joined it, who infiltrated it. It's sort of not to be trusted, in my opinion.
No, that's a good point. In other words, I want to know who in Anonymous is doing that, because it could be the CIA. We don't know.
Right. Could be the CIA using that as a cutout. Right.
There we go. Coming up right after this short break, we're talking to Manila Chan from the now also banned RT. Apple pulled their app down from the website, but I showed earlier how anybody, you can take the RT website, you can take the app, the Sputnik website, hit the share button on your iPhone, add to home screen. Now you've got an instant button if you want to get to it quicker. You knew that trick, right, Jason?
That's a good
Jason?
one, yes. Yes, I got it. Yep.
Yeah. A lot of people don't know that you can add any website, not just those two, to your home screen easily. It's a way to bookmark things and have them as easily accessible as an app. But coming up right after this, we're talking to the great Manila Chan about journalism in an age of war and censorship in an empire of lies. Right after this on The Backstory.
Stuck in traffic? No problem. Stay informed. Stay tuned to Radio Sputnik on 105.5 FM or 1390 AM in the Washington, D.C. area. Need more? Follow us on Facebook or check us out on SputnikNews.com.
They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime.
Like beer? Yeah, we drank beer.
Whoever's in charge, and I want the record.
Let's talk about that.
Discussing all the controversies and news across the disunited states of America. Tune in to Fault Lines every weekday from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern, only on Radio Sputnik.
In a media landscape filled with so-called journalists acting as stenographers for their billionaire bosses, there is a desperate need for news, analysis, and perspectives that buck the status quo and get to the heart of how domestic and international events impact you and me, as well as showing how we can get involved in the struggle to change that status quo. Check out By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik, Monday through Friday from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, to hear the stories and voices that mainstream media refuses to tell you. And join us as we connect the political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us. That's By Any Means Necessary, Monday through Friday at 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on Radio Sputnik.
Hi, I'm political analyst Garland Nixon.
And I'm political scientist, author, and nationally syndicated columnist Dr. Wilmer Leon.
We're the co-hosts for The Critical Hour, airing Monday through Friday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time here on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C.
We close out your day with a thorough and hard-hitting analysis of the day's top stories, where we bring in brilliant scholars, authors, and investigative journalists from around the world.
And on Fridays, it's panel time, when we do a roundup of the week's most important issues.
Join us to keep up with the world's top stories.
Enjoy an in-depth analysis.
And have a little fun along the way. Listen to our show,
The Critical Hour, Monday through Fridays on Radio Sputnik.
And we're back, 105.5 FM, AM 1390 in Washington, D.C. And all over the damn internet. We're still all over the internet. By the way, they can take the app away, but you can still get to the website if Anonymous hasn't taken it down. Joining us now from RT, the great Manila Chan, great friend of the show. Hey, Manila, how you doing?
Hey, guys. Good to be on with you. I guess some people can still hear us, although I'm very confused by the mainstream media, trying to have it both ways, saying RT is dangerous, all this news, all this disinformation is getting out there. but then they turn around and say, but no one watches them. Nielsen doesn't even register them. So, here we are.
Well, I'll tell you a similar example that my girl Danny pointed out to me earlier today. She was talking about this, and she said, now, wait, what is it? Is Putin devastating cities in Ukraine, or is he losing and this whole invasion is falling apart? Because that is, both of those are, this is when narratives bump up against each other.
Right.
So Putin is both losing and decimating Ukraine. Have you noticed that, Manila?
Good trick.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and don't forget, he's allegedly ill right now, and he's looking, disheveled and, puffy or whatever the people are saying now. After he was, on air last week, we broadcasted his speech live as he was considering this military action on Ukraine. He seemed perfectly lucid to me, and this is the American mainstream press, of course, with our president, Joe Biden, who can barely form a sentence. So there's that too. So I don't know. He's both winning and losing the war, winning and losing the internet. And I don't know, but I think if you were going to compare marbles between Putin and Biden, I would put my money on Putin.
Well, and by the way, we have breaking news coming over the wire right now, Manila. CNN is reporting that Vladimir Putin's hair looks wicked stupid. I'm not sure what that means. But
CNN Boston.
Yes.
But so let me ask you, Manila. Let me ask you a semi-personal question. It's about your experience as a journalist. Don't worry, it's not going to be creepy. But so, as somebody who's been in journalism for a long time, Manila, I'm curious when you first discovered that you were curious. In other words, I remember very distinctly when I was working the John Edwards story, I realized that it destroyed the illusion for me that other journalists didn't suck, because I saw just journalists who sucked. And I realized I was simply more curious than they were. I was interested, even when I talked to people. One of the reasons I don't like censorship is, even if it's somebody who I don't agree with, you know who I'd love to interview right now? Is Vladimir Zelensky. Yeah, sure, I'd love to interview Putin. Right? I'm curious. Or somebody from Right Sector, or somebody from the Azov Battalion. I want to know what they think. And so when did you figure out, as a journalist, Manila, that you were special, in the sense that you're obviously more curious than most journalists? Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I would say that this was something that stemmed out of childhood, when I would go to school, and my family is ethnically Chinese and Lao. I identify as Lao, but when I went to school as a kid, it was in the 80s. It was rah rah America. We just wrapped up the Vietnam War, patriotism, all this stuff. So I would hear one story about the great and wonderful God bless America, and then I'd come home and literally hear war stories from family who witnessed the Nixon's illegitimate carpet bombing of Laos and the spraying of Agent Orange, the secret war that happened there for a decade. And when I realized that these stories didn't comport, I think I knew as a kid I began to be more curious. And as a journalist, I think I realized when I was living in the Middle East and reporting for a lifestyle magazine, I realized, I think there's more serious stuff happening here in Dubai, and like human trafficking. Why doesn't anybody cover that? And that's when the trouble began.
Whoa.
Well, because I know. Well, Manila, do you want to tell as much as I know the story, but tell as much as you want to tell about that, Manila.
Oof. Well, I'll say this much about the Pearl of the Desert, is that it is a big PR machine, and their tentacles and pockets are deep, the tentacles are long, and journalists can cower in fear if they do not go along with the narrative, if you shatter the beautiful image on the world stage about what that place is, they will come for you. And that's my personal experience. And I can tell you from personal experience that it follows you back to the motherland, back to California, because the tentacles go that far. And I realized that's when I thought, you know, I'm going to screw the narrative, screw the smoke screen of everybody. And before I knew it, I wound up at RT, and it was the right fit for someone as defiant as me.
And it's fair to say, without getting into details, you faced some scary situations in covering that story. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, we can call them scary.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yes, no. And again, it's Manila's story, so I don't want to, it's not my place to tell it, but I know a bit about it because Manila and I have talked about it off air before. And I was scared just hearing about it. It was very dire situation. And now let me say, I don't know if you know this, by the way, I didn't know you were Lao. Do you know who's got a big Lao community is Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
No kidding. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
No.
Where I am, it's one of the most identifiable ethnic communities here in Sioux Falls. There's a big Lao community here. And I don't know why, but there is. I just assume some people came.
You gotta.
They said, I never want to be warm again.
Right.
Lee, you gotta ask the Lao diaspora there about why their families. I mean, not the Lao Americans like me, but their parents. You got to ask them why they ended up there and what years they ended up there, because
maybe
they'll all tell you the stories.
There.
They'll tell you stories
Refugees.
about they'll tell you stories about Nixon's secret war and the refugee camps. And what the US government did in order to make nice was, okay, let's plop these people here, let's plop them there. So there's a lot more to the Lao diaspora than the US media ever wants to cover. And they certainly didn't want to do that in the 1970s when my family came to the country, because back then, there were certain, all the president's men. You don't say a whole lot about the president. And it seems like we're right back there now. You don't say a whole lot. You're going to cheerlead President Biden now.
Well, you see, that's exactly it. We're back to CIA stuff, right? Paperclip and Mockingbird.
No, it all comes down to that. And I'm sure someone very nice in the government said, well, if people are from Southeast Asia, where there's a very warm climate, let's send them to a place where it gets down to 30 below in the winter.
Yeah.
That'll be nice. And so they ended up here.
Makes a lot of sense.
And there's no mountains whatsoever. But anyway, so that's interesting. Now, Manila, so first off, RT, you're with RT America, but RT had divisions kind of all over the world. And now in the EU, RT and Sputnik have been completely banned. They took them off YouTube there a few hours ago. But I will say this, I'm sure you saw this. How did you feel when you saw the head of RT come out and say, no one is going to be laid off for this? I thought that was a great statement for him to make publicly early on, not just because I know people who work for RT, but because it shows a certain commitment. Look, we're not going to stop just because you're taking us off the air. We're not going to stop telling the truth. How did you feel about that statement, Manila?
Yeah, well, Margarita Simonyan, the head of RT in its entirety, RT America as well, falls under the umbrella. To hear Margarita Simonyan, who is to be in the position that she's in, she's a young working mom, and for her to have the bravery to stand against these corporate empires and big tech monopolies, I think takes a lot of guts, because there's going to be a lot of backlash probably directed towards her personally. And for her to stand up for all of us, for all of the and if people care, we are like 99% Americans at the DC studio. For her to stand up and say that we will continue to have jobs and our health insurance and be able to feed our families and take our kids to the doctors means the world to everybody that's working there in a time where, you know, businesses are shuttering because of this 2-year COVID pandemic, these shutdowns everywhere. It means a whole lot to have leadership like that that is as equally defiant as I am. So that resonated really well with me.
Well, and Manila, what does it mean in terms of corporate life and your life as a professional in Joe Biden's America versus corporations in Russia under Putin?
Well, I mean, I've actually, I hate to burst anyone's bubble, but I've never been to Russia. I'd like to. Probably now is not a good time, but I can't say, you know, what business is like in Russia, although I have a buddy of mine who has a very successful business. He left Southern California during, like, the writing was on the wall after Trump lost, and then, you know, the pandemic was just breaking the bank for him. He shut down his business in Los Angeles and moved to Moscow, of all places, opened up shop, and business is booming for him.
And I can see that. And Jason, let me tell you, I talked to Peter Lavelle at the early stages, who's over on RT, and he lives in Moscow. And I talked to some other people over there. During the early stages of the pandemic, RT in Russia, they were telling people stay home, but they were still paying them because they have some, you know what TV's like, Jason, professionally. There's often people who've been there 20 years who are camera operators or like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So RT, everything I heard, Manila, was that they were taking care of the employees in the early stages of the pandemic in Moscow, that RT universally has done, right? You heard the same thing, right?
Oh yeah, Lee, they not, that wasn't just in RT Moscow. This is, you know, not just at headquarters. It was the whole entire company. And nobody was laid off, nobody was fired. So even in the face of this brutal shutdown that we faced here across the U.S. that shut down mom and pop shops all over the country, we all remained employed if we chose to stay, to stick it out and continue to work. I mean, some people, obviously, there was an attrition rate because some people decided, you know, this pandemic made them want to move home to their respective home states, home cities, and they parted ways with RT in DC. But it wasn't because, you know, the company's actions. It was their own personal choice. Now, for the Russian government, I can tell you this, as I'm a relatively new mom still. My son is only 3 years old, and this is my first child. We don't have very long maternity leave, if at all. You know, according to federal law, there's not much in the way of FMLA. Let me tell you, though, my friends in Russia, whether they work at RT or at other companies, Russia gives their new moms a full year of basically an FMLA type law there, a full year. And women are compensated for at least 6 months or more, depending on the company they work for. So here, how economically their government supports women and supports families. The Moscovites are doing much better than us in DC. I can say that much.
Well, you're making the point better than I did. But what I meant was, in the time since the Soviet Union fell, and there's about 20 years that Putin was running Russia during that time, we've seen corporations rise in the United States that today are collectively acting like a Politburo, canceling people who dissent. And in Russia, companies like RT have come up that are allowing people like Lee and you and everyone to speak their minds, whatever the truth may be. That is a stark contrast.
No, I agree with that. And I also got to say,
we are currently living in an upside down world.
Right.
And Manila, I just got to say I'm a little envious because I've applied for maternity leave for my son Shane, for me, because, you know, I did have him, and I've gotten nothing. I get turned on cold on that. So it could be because of my dude and because he's almost 30. But, okay. But, Manila, so let me do what I've done with everybody. I'm just going to ask you the broadest question possible. What are your thoughts on what's going on between Russia and Ukraine now? Take that anywhere you want to, Manila Shan. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm vehemently anti-war myself, and I think you would hope that by now, in the year 2022, that people have moved beyond using physical acts of violence to make their point heard. So it's I can't say that I love seeing bombs dropping, and I support that, but at the same time, I think it's important for people to understand the psychology behind why world leaders have to make the decisions that they make. And when you start painting leaders like Vladimir Putin, who are unlike thoughtful, thoroughly planned out, you paint them into a corner when you've known, such as it's been revealed by WikiLeaks in their latest CIA cable dump last week. The CIA knew full well back in 2014, or even 2013 rather, before the Maidan stuff started, and how you would be provoking Vladimir Putin. I think you leave world leaders, especially in the way of the U.S., you push a lot of world leaders into corners where they have nowhere to go but bite. You can't keep poking the bear and expect it not to swipe you. And I think that's what we're witnessing now after 8 full years of warning, after an American coup and at Maidan Square, after hundreds of, or at least 100 people that we know of, were essentially executed by the hands of the U.S. government by way of influencing the actions there. The U.S. government is culpable in at least 100 people's lives being lost in order to coup President Yanukovych, and then turn this around, fast forward to 8 years later, and turn this around to say Vladimir Putin's striking out of nowhere, out of the blue. Well, no, that's not true. You guys knew what was happening because the CIA cables that WikiLeaks put out last week identify exactly that. So put necessarily the blame all on Vladimir Putin, because the U.S. empire has sought to hegemony all over the world. And using other people's bombs, it's the U.S. that's also at fault. So while I'm not a fan of any bombs dropping anywhere, you have to understand the psychology behind it as well. And I think that's what the U.S. media is missing.
Now, let me ask you, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Jason before we brush on Manila, which is, I've not seen anybody on social media anywhere who said, when I started this thing, I was pro-Russian, but the more I looked into it, now I'm on Ukraine's side. I have seen some people, not as many as I'd like and not as fast as I'd like, say, when this started, I was taking the side of Ukraine, and the more I looked into it, the more I see Vladimir Putin's telling the truth about stuff. I've seen it go that way, where they say, I started pro-Ukraine, but I've ended up seeing that Vladimir Putin's telling the truth. Have you seen anybody who started out pro-Vladimir Putin, pro-Russia, whatever that means in this situation? Because, again, nobody's in favor of war. But who started out pro-Russian, who then looked into it and said, I did the research. Ukraine's completely right. Have you seen that at all?
To my knowledge, no. I mean, I was with the former group. I mean, my knee-jerk reaction, because I am a human being, you see missiles flying, and your knee-jerk reaction is to feel bad for those on the receiving end. But then I regained my composure, and I remembered all the things that happened in Maidan. I was working for RT in 2014 when the Crimea stuff happened, and all the misinformation in the mainstream news, acting like Vladimir Putin just went over there and overthrew the local government and took over this chunk of land, when that's not really what happened. I had to recompose myself, get away from the knee-jerk reaction, and understand how the U.S. was complicit in this, how the EU has been complicit in this, how NATO is complicit in this.
Yeah.
But really, I really can't find anybody that I can tell that was pro-Putin and then suddenly flipped to going, yeah, Ukraine.
You know, we heard they were
Let
sending...
me just say this. I'm gonna ask you something that we can't prove, in the sense that we don't have a camera that's been videotaping you 24/7 for the past few weeks. But I will tell you, I swear to God, in the life of my children, my experience, my boss here, I've gotten no direction from management about how to cover this. Hey, Lee, you have to make sure you point out this or that. I'm telling the same story I've been telling for years. So you're working at RT, Manila. Are there big meetings in the morning where they hand you a Putin pin to wear, or what? You know, what's going on at RT about the coverage?
Oh yeah, we do our morning prayers and you know, thank God for Vladimir Putin. No, I'm kidding, obviously. No, we don't do any of that. We just go over our rundown. What's the big stories today? What you know, what reporter package did you know, came in? Was it from Donetsk? Was it from Luhansk? Was it from Kiev? I mean, just really basic stuff. And then, we're talking 5-10 minute meetings, and then I go back to my office and I start doing research. Sometimes I make my phone calls. If I don't know the guests, then you know, it's not some weird nefarious newsroom like people want to think and make it out to be, which is really tragic in some ways, because I almost wish I was involved in something a little more dark and mysterious. But it really is just a plain old newsroom with normal people, normal Americans working in it. I mean, I really wish I had more to say about that. I wish I had a hotline to Putin. Let's say that.
And I know that any conflict I'd cover, I'd want to look at both sides. That's what I'd want to do. Right? So, Vladimir Putin did not make a speech where he sat in front of the Russian people and said, okay, everyone, guess why I'm doing this? Here, I'm going to try to read my mind. He didn't say that. He gave an in-depth history lesson. He said why he's doing it. Then you look at the American media, they're not reporting what he said. They're trying to guess. How many reports have you seen in the mainstream media, Manila, where they're saying, why is Putin doing this? He wants to put together Russia again, or he's mad about whatever.
The Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Right. Someone broke up with him, something like that. And when you listen to Vladimir Putin, it doesn't mean because he says that it's true. That's where you have to keep researching. But it's not a mystery, right? And do you feel the obligation to present both sides? And I wish there were a better side on the other side. Their side is to ignore what Putin's saying. Well, that's to me, isn't it, Manila? Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, yeah, we definitely show both sides, and we show what the locals in Kiev are doing, the bomb shelters they're going to. We're showing all of that. But at the same time, you can't just show a bleeding heart, crying Zelensky, with a standing O from the EU nations, where that argument doesn't hold water when you're only tugging at heartstrings. When you actually listen to Vladimir Putin's speech, whether you like him or not, he's presenting historical, verifiable facts, very sane and very succinct. And the mainstream media in the U.S. does not address any of that.
Hey, Manila, we really appreciate you taking the time. We know how busy you are. Manila Chan from RT. Check her out while you still can find, because you can always get to the, again, there's DDoS attacks happening, but you can still get to the site. Manila Chan, thanks so much for joining us. Robert Bridge. Jason, great job. Did you have fun?
That was great.
We'll be back tomorrow on the best damn radio show in the world. I'm Lee Stranahan. This has been The Backstory.